Loud and clear. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to be looking at commercial roofing, somewhat in depth. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Matt G with us here. Matt is a partner of ours in our software company. He's a full-time commercial estimator and started from, I guess, the bottom when it comes to roofing. Hey, Matt, tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I started in the field. I started in service and then eventually became a service foreman. Um, then eventually worked my way and took over running a re-roof crew, low slope crew, um, and then eventually into estimating. And here I am.
Yeah, cool. And Matt is quite the developer as well. He's been developing some awesome programs. Um, so this is kind of our goal for today. And of course, we want to welcome you guys to ask as many questions as you have. But as far as commercial roofing is concerned, just getting an understanding of the trade, putting yourself in a position to ask the right questions if internally or even externally if you're dealing with manufacturers or subs and that sort of thing. Building the revenue stream is obviously the end goal, right? In everything we do in Service Edge is we want to help guys build their revenue streams and adding some confidence. And so what we've found, and every now and again, there'll be some polls. We'd love it if you guys ask questions or answer the polls. You can ask questions and answer polls. And you get an opportunity to click on a QR code if you want to chat to us some more as well. So,
Brian,
yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to point out to the attendees that anyone who does want to ask a question, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of the meeting window. If you're not familiar with where that is, there's a chat and then there's also a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop those into the Q&A button. And if anyone can't find it, just throw it in chat and we'll make sure it gets to Q&A.
Awesome. And definitely want to encourage interruptions, right? I know it's hard to be interactive in Zoom, but just as much as we can, get some questions answered while we're here and while we got Matt here as well. So I've always felt this, that commercial roofing is it's essential, obviously, right? Everybody has a roof and every commercial building has a roof, but it seems to be one of the most underserved trades in construction. And when you compare it to HVAC and these other trades, plumbing even, it just seems like they have a much more solid infrastructure. Matt, do you have any experience with other trades and, to compare with commercial roofing?
You mean as far as me actually working in them?
Or just,
Or
or people or anything about those trades?
not a lot. I know a couple of electricians, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's actually super
Uh,
comparable.
Yeah, although that is another trade that gets great education, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
they typically get to work inside, which is nice.
yeah, especially for someone sitting in Michigan. So if we look at this lack of formal training in the commercial industry, we find that people are learning on the job or by word of mouth, or fortunately by manufacturers. And, now the NRCA is doing a little more. But what was your experience, Matt? How did you learn?
Um, yeah, it was definitely for me on the job. Just got thrown into the field. Even running a crew, I kind of got thrown into that. Um, Probably earlier on than I should have, but it kind of forces you to learn quick, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to learn. My experience was in estimating, so I kind of got thrown in estimating, and when I started in estimating, I thought a takeoff was, something you did in an aircraft. So it was definitely starting cold. I got of course, a boating background. I was a sailboat captain for 5 years. I was in the Merchant Navy for 5. So I lived at sea for 10 years. And it was only after several years in the roofing industry I realized a roof is an upside down boat. We just had the opposite problem, the water coming from the bottom instead of the top. But so, talking about this lack of education, one of the first things that jumped out to me is people being afraid to ask questions. And so the difficult thing is you get into this industry, you get the job, and now you kind of in the deep end. And the longer you're there, the harder it is to ask a simple question, because people are going to be like, what? You don't know that? And so, at our company, we had like over 90 people in the staff itself, and then 300 guys in the field. And the 90 in the staff, I've got to think more than half of them had a very limited knowledge of roofing. And I'd hate to know what the proportion was in the field, because that would be really scary. But like, what are you seeing, Matt, with, like, I know you've been chief estimator at a couple of big companies. What do you get the same impression?
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, like it's funny, the people afraid to ask questions thing, I feel like there's still days where even myself, I'm guilty of it, right? There's things where you're just constantly learning, and I'm like, I feel like I should know this, so I kind of don't want to ask somebody, but I got to figure it out,
Yeah. Thank you, Lord, for chat and Grok and Gemini and that. I mean, because it used to be so hard to find something about roofing online. Google didn't have any great resources. And then we've got this lack of structure. And Ross, are you able to chime in here? I don't know if you are. Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you training companies every day for about 10 years now. What does that lack of structure mean to you?
I mean, it's everybody needs it, right? That's first off, and we just know that it's a long game, and it comes from the top with commitment, and we have to bring that commitment every day, or it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it's funny you said first off, because it just seems to me that it should be first, right? You should get a structure first. But that's not the way we get into this industry. It's normally you're talking to the head estimator is talking to the chief superintendent in the pub, and next thing they got a roofing company. And then, of course, we've got this missed fundamentals, which really, in Matt's seat as an estimator, you can't afford to have, right? If that is the key to it all. So
that's the job.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like Lombardi said, right? This is a football. I mean, it is so important, those fundamentals. And at the end of the day, it's keeping water out, right? That's what Division 7 is all about. And water goes downhill, fortunately. That kind of helps us a little bit. But so we're going to spend some time just talking about commercial roofs in general. And so commercial in this area, we're going to talk mostly low slope. Of course, there are a lot of steep slope commercial roofs, but just let's talk about low slope. And the interesting thing, of course, about low slope is that it's crazy, right? It's crazy that we would create a flat surface for protection of a building, and so the water can't get off it. But it's a whole lot less expensive than pitching that. Sometimes it's impossible to pitch, some of these buildings, and that's real estate. You get that real estate for other things. And Matt, how long have you been in commercial roofing now? Is
It's
it over a
about,
decade?
yeah, it's about a decade, about 10
Yeah.
years.
So before that, how much did you talk about commercial roofing or even look at a roof?
Um, Absolutely none at all.
Yeah. It is intriguing that we would and now I bet you can't drive past a roof where you see a flag or a cone or a head and you're thinking, hey, who got that job? What's going on there? So we're gonna keep moving. I see. Oh, okay, cool. All right. So here's an agenda for us to go through, and you can speed us up just by taking your mic off and saying speak quickly or something. But if you've answered any of the polls, that's great. We'd be cool to hear some of those responses. But here's our agenda for today. So roofing, we often refer to it as the roof sandwich. And by the way, we just finished a 10 series course on roofing that's going to is available to you guys. But we start with the deck or the substrate, right? We got a building and then we get a deck. So we're going to talk a little bit about the deck and then the sandwich as it goes up, right? Vapor barrier and then insulation and then different types of insulation, including tapers and crickets. And then, of course, we got the different membranes that go on or multiple layers of membranes and those assemblies. And then the different options that you have for those assemblies. And then there are other criteria like perimeter fastening and that sort of thing, or for uplift. And then we'll talk about flashing as well. So we're going to sort of try run the gambit. Please, as I say, answer or question us as we go. Here's an opportunity. You can just scan this and get on a call with any of us. We've got about 6 of us here, Patrick, Nicole, Ross, Matt, myself, available to take questions. So just don't hesitate to do that. As we go through this, and I don't really want to talk about these roof systems in detail, but we're going to really talk about modified or built up and single-ply. We're not going to get into coatings much. We're not going to get into spray foam. My roofing experience is mostly in South Florida, and spray foam, there's probably 2 days of the year that you can actually have the right humidity to use spray foam anyway. So we'll talk about these layered systems, and then we'll talk about the single plies. So we've got the TPOs and the EPDMs and the PVCs and the KEEs and what have you, and of course different manufacturers for all of them. And so let's just start at the bottom. And here it's all about the deck, right? And I say that cautiously. But Matt, one of the first questions you've got as an estimator is, what deck is it, right?
Absolutely.
And do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
I think that when you're defining your scope or your assembly, it has to start there, because that it just defines your entire attachment method.
Exactly. It's attachment, and what goes along with attachment is negative pressure or uplift, right? So, and if any of you guys are influenced by the Miami-Dade product control NOAs, you'll see they've sorted their entire database by deck type and negative pressure. And then that's the next step we take. So as far as the deck types that are out there, metal and wood are probably the most common, right? Wood has been around obviously for a long time. Down in Miami-Dade, we get a ton of those beachfront hotels have wood decks from years ago. Nowadays, that's all concrete. And the interesting thing about a metal deck, if you look at this picture that's here, where you've got these joists, the metal deck has to run perpendicular to these joists, because the joist spacing is what's supporting the metal deck. So we can't run it, parallel to the joist, it'll just fall through. So it has to run perpendicular. And so then depending what's influencing your slope, if the joists are creating your slope, your metal deck is running perpendicular to that, and a metal deck has flutes, right? So if you get moisture through the roof system, it doesn't just run off to the edge. There's not a whole lot of slope there. So it'll either rust the metal or it'll move, in one direction or the other. And the way it usually finds its way into the building is like a weld hole or something where the metal is joined together. And Matt, I know you've probably got quite a few stories about wood and metal decks. One of them, I feel like for me, is just when you come into a building and you can see the metal deck above you and you see rust, it's always shocking to me how much that is amplified above the deck, right?
100%. I mean, if you can see it on the bottom, you can bet that it's worse on top.
Yeah, and maybe like catastrophically worse. What about are there any of these that jump out to you? Any good stories you've got on any of these decks that come to mind?
I mean, maybe more of an embarrassing story than anything.
Yeah.
But, yeah, when I first started roofing, I didn't know what a gypsum deck was. And
Right.
they had me going out and I had to take a core because we had to do some service work and they were looking at a re-roof. And so I took a core and I thought, oh, that's just like a substrate board. And I just kept going. And next thing I know, I'm looking at their gym floor.
Yeah. So a lot of you know about coring roofs. For those of you who don't, we got this little coring tool that we push down into the roof surface, and that's not the only way. One of my takeoff guys used a Sawzall, and we'd get square cores. But so I did exactly the same thing with Tectum, and now the problem is, Tectum is sort of the acoustical ceilings are Tectum, so that they're usually visible from inside the building. So that was an interesting patch job because the building was locked. We were doing this after sort of late hours, and we had to seal it up. But with these different deck types, for instance, with concrete, you don't your attachment to that deck that Matt was talking about is key, right? Because that membrane has to be attached. Well, the insulation has to be attached. Just your whole roof system has to be attached to that deck. And with concrete, you don't really want to be screwing it in because you basically got to drill a pilot hole for every screw. Now, that is sometimes done. Have you had any jobs like that, Matt, where you actually do pilot holes?
Yep. There's been a few. It's a pain a little, but
Yeah, and your labor numbers up there.
yep.
But on the other side of that argument is the adhesives are so expensive, like crazy expensive. So, and the way that you put these adhesives down, there's several methods, but you get like a serpentine track to put it down, or you've got a splatter type of method. But when you're thinking that everything's relying on that adhesive, you want to make sure that you are doing it correctly and you somehow letting it set well.
It's not just
Yeah.
It's not just about the adhesive either. There's you're probably not, you don't run into this much in Florida, I'm sure, but when we're trying to turn a ballasted system into a non-ballasted system and salvage all the existing insulation, I mean, sometimes your options are limited, right?
Yeah. And then you guys also have the temperature issues that affect adhesives. But there was a time when Florida had a lot of ballasted roofs, and then Hurricane Andrew blew through there, and then suddenly they were still ballasted roofs, but without ballast. The ballast was like in the Everglades somewhere. Yeah, cool. So anything else we should mention as far as the deck is concerned that you can think of?
Brian, just while we're on this, we just have one question. Matt, actually, this one would be for you. In terms of salvaging insulation, salvage it for what purpose? Do any manufacturers allow reuse?
Yeah. So you can, as long as it's not wet, you can typically leave it in place. You still have to take into account your building code and energy code. But yeah, there's a lot of times where you don't have to do a full tear off every time.
Yeah, and that's a great question because it does definitely vary by state, right? Like where Matt is in Michigan, the energy code has to be applied. The new energy code has to be applied on a re-roof, right? Or whatever you do on the roof, right? Even if you just reskin it, you got to apply the new energy code, don't you?
Correct.
Yeah. In North Carolina, you don't have to.
And I shouldn't say that because it's definitely up for interpretation based on.
Okay. Yeah, because in North Carolina, and I think this is the same in Florida, it's grandfathered in until you absolutely do a re-roof. So, you could have a second roof and not have to meet the new standards, but then if you do tear off, you have to do another one. So we had a client in North Carolina that had an agreement, this is with GAF actually, that you could take off the membrane, and if the insulation's all right, just put a new membrane right on top of it, and now you still only got one roof, so you're not talking about a re-roof next time. You run into that sort of thing?
I'm sorry, say it again.
You haven't run into that in Michigan, have you? That ability to just reskin it without changing the insulation out.
So yeah, I literally just had a meeting on this today. Michigan has recently adopted, I think, the 2021 building code. And so the way that we're interpreting it, if you peel off the membrane, you have to meet R30. If you leave the membrane in place, you don't, but you still can't have more than one roof system. And you still, ultimately end up having to check with the municipality.
Yeah. But no, that's great. And I know we're getting into the weeds here and I knew this would happen because Matt and I talk roofing a lot, but the downside of going over the existing membrane is now you got two roofs, right? And so that means next time you got to tear it off. Whereas if you can peel it off and just put a new membrane on, now you got one roof, and so you got another shot at it. Yeah. All right, cool. So thanks for that question. Let us know if there are any others.
I think there's one more comment in here from David Henry, right? If you save the ballast insulation, how do you determine aged R value to get the R value? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, I think that goes, that'd kind of take us back into the code conversation, right? Because then you're talking if you have to bring the R value up or meet a certain R value or not, depending on how the municipality interprets the code.
Yeah. And then, of course, your options are how thick is the insulation and what's the R value of that particular insulation. But David, you probably, I mean, and I don't know if you guys have very strict codes where you are. South Florida was absolutely crazy. But you guys might be have less stringent things happening in Georgia there. And if you're in Texas, it would be even a little bit easier, probably. Cool. Thanks for the question. Do we want to talk about the polls at all, or should we just keep cooking?
I'd keep it moving. We're gonna accumulate questions here and want to make sure we get it through everything.
All right. And yeah, we may never, the way we chat about roofing, but all right. So the next thing we're going to do is go above the deck, right? So what's next as far as the deck is, after the deck is these fire and vapor barriers, or those control layers. And then we got insulation and membrane, and on top of that, we got the flashing and drainage. So let's start with fire and vapor barriers, and this is always a fun topic. Well, yeah, I'll be saying this about every topic, but this is a fun topic for me because where Matt is in Michigan, your condensation is coming from the bottom when it's cold, right?
Yeah.
And that's what these layers prevent, right? Well, the fire barrier is one thing, and then the vapor barrier is another. But we actually preventing. This isn't water coming through the roof system. This is water coming underneath the roof system that can affect the insulation quite badly. In Florida, we got the opposite, where the inside of the building is cold, air conditioned, and then the outside is boiling hot. But again, condensation. What's your experience with fire and vapor barriers, Matt?
So the biggest thing that I think is really important is doing your best to understand where the dew point currently is on the existing system, especially if they're, not currently having problems. You probably want to be careful maybe not to change that, right? Because if adding more isn't always the answer. If you change the dew point, you could introduce new problems.
All right.
So
And
it's about more than just how the roof is designed. It's really about how the building is designed.
And what tools are you using to measure that dew point?
In the past, I've worked with some manufacturer technical departments and some engineers. Especially where I get really nervous and concerned is like food grade facilities.
Yeah.
It gets so humid in there and it can get so cold where we are. So, I mean, you just got to be, really careful of what you do.
Yeah. No, and in Florida, we got these cold storage facilities, with the opposite problem, right? So and just in layman's terms, what's happening here with condensation, you've got, water is a miraculous thing, right? Where it can be a vapor, it can be a liquid, it can be a solid. And when water vapor turns to liquid, it will affect the insulation on the deck, and it will also affect the deck. And so what Matt's saying about that dew point control is whatever your vapor barrier is doing, if it's encouraging for more moisture, then you're going to have moisture on a metal deck in that case, and now you got rust. But if you don't have vapor barrier, you've got moisture, and now your insulation could be affected. And then the fire barriers are to getting your Class A classifications ready, just to it slows down the spread of the fire, right? It doesn't stop the fire, it just slows it down. How about fire barriers, Matt? What you got on those?
Yeah, I've typically end up with a substrate board if there's some sort of requirement to meet fire rating. But it certainly depends on what type of deck you're on. Those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah, and so that would be like a dense deck or something that, yeah, and those are expensive again, right? Several dollars per foot for a dense deck, and so now we're talking about adding a huge amount of cost to the roof. But it's one of those things where you can pay for it now or you can pay for it later. Huh? If you don't do that, you're probably going to suffer a consequence. And I love what the NRCA says about maintaining roofs is, they typically last in 14 or 15 years without solid maintenance program. And very often that ties back to the way it was installed, just not installed properly. All right, so you're ready for the next layer, Matt? We go to the insulation layer. And so we've got a couple of things, of course, on insulation. The one is the new insulation code. And as you say, I think 2021, right, is when that code came out. And it got pretty stringent. What's the minimum now? Is it R30 or what?
It depends on, it goes by region, right? So where I am currently, it's typically minimum R30. If I go up to like the UP, towards, almost Canada, I think it's maybe R34, R35 or something like that.
All right. And so different insulations have different R values per inch or based on their thickness. And so typically we use a lot of ISO. You guys use a lot of ISO as well, I imagine.
Oh yeah.
So to get to that R30, R34, you're in sort of this 5-6 inches of ISO.
Yeah, so typically what I see in specs most of the time would be like 2 layers of 2.6 inch, so you're at 5.2 to get to the R30.
Okay, yeah. All right, wow. So, and then you go up further north and you're adding more to that. Yep. And then again, now that coverboard can help a little bit, but they don't really have a lot of insulating value, do they?
No, and sometimes you got to watch too, right? Like if there's a lot of tapered, are they asking for an average R value, minimum R value?
Yeah, exactly, with the tapered.
Hey guys.
Yeah.
We had just one other comment come in. David said he just never heard exactly how to determine the dew point on going back to what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, David, it would be fair for me to say I have no clue. I mean, there are instruments. And Matt, you were saying you very often get an engineer or a manufacturer involved.
Like an engineer and architect to be able to help you determine that. I would say that you're probably only getting them involved if there's a reason to be concerned. If you know you're going to be changing that assembly enough to really affect that. I wouldn't get them involved on every project, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's got to be complex because there's also the time of day, right? And what kind of a day is it? So I imagine a lot of it's theoretical, David, but so yeah, I don't know. We can do some more homework for you on that, but I don't have a great answer. Matt, while we're on here with insulation, we talk about wind uplift at multiple levels, right? We talk about it with insulation, and then we talk about it again with the membrane itself. Are you having to meet perimeter fastening and corner fastening for insulation, and then again for the membrane?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it depends on your assembly. If you're doing rhino bond or adhered or something, the membrane's kind of
part of it.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely. You know, I'm in Michigan, right? So we have Lake Michigan, and it's kind of like the ocean that way. Like you have to, maybe not quite as bad, but you have to pay attention how close you are to the lake, height of the building, all that stuff, and get your proper fastening enhancements, and then obviously your warranty comes into play.
So when you're close to the lake like that, is it like being close to the ocean where you're considered to be in a high wind velocity zone?
Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know, within 2 miles or 1.5 miles or something of the lake.
Okay. And guys, for those of you who are not that familiar with roofing, some of this stuff blows your mind, right? That we're having a discussion about how to calculate dew point and wind uplift and negative pressures and that sort of thing. There's a lot involved in it when you get to commercial roofing. And so it's great to have a good, strong, basic understanding. And then that also helps you with what questions to ask, right? So sometimes it's easier to ask a question when you have some knowledge. And so now that seems to be a legitimate question. Do any of you other guys, Nicole, Pat, Dion, Ross, any of you guys want to make a comment before we move on? Or can I just rely on the fact that you will jump in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So insulation, I don't know that we've covered it to death, but because we haven't really spoken about tapered systems and crickets and lightweight concrete, which is an insulation and a deck. And but if you ever have an opportunity to see a lightweight concrete system going in, you will be shocked by what they are doing to your roof. I mean, they are pumping gallons of sludge out there. And the guys walking around in gum boots. What do you call gum boots in this country? It's
knee boots.
Yeah. So I've got 2 experiences with those boots. In South Africa, we call them gum boots. In England, they call them Wellingtons, and I don't know what you call them in the States. But you're not going to hazard a guess.
I always call them knee boots.
Knee boots. Okay. It means you're knee deep in something, and we won't say what. All right. So as far as insulations are concerned, some of the types. So ISO, which is what we normally refer to it as, because poly, ISO, and the rest of the sentence is too difficult to say. EPS has the same problem, and XPS, those are 3 of them. And we're normally looking at insulation from the standpoint of, is it an open cell or is it a closed cell? Because that's important for moisture retention. What else helps you with these insulation selections, Matt?
Well, cost, obviously.
Yeah.
Cost, and then if there's like a scope advantage one way or the other, obviously the most common is going to be ISO for the R value, but I've run into situations where we're just trying to get some tapered up there. We're not relying on adhesives or something. EPS can be a fairly cheap way to get a custom tapered system down. So,
and isn't it interesting, after we had that supply crisis, Suddenly now you go core roof and you see more EPS than you ever used to.
That's another good point. During COVID, we used a lot of EPS.
Yeah, yeah, because there were some guys buying all the ISO, and we won't mention their names. So those different insulation types, but yeah, poly ISO or ISO is probably the most common. You can see some of them. These are foil faced. In fact, I'll date myself, but years ago, I don't know if you guys remember when we had the Chinese drywall problem in the interior construction industry. This maybe I'm too old for the group, but after that we had this the foil or the faces of insulation problem. Do you remember that? Where this insulation, the face of the insulation was peeling off. And if you think of an adhered system, that's kind of concerning, right? Because that's really what you're attaching it to. So there was a bit of that where we had to go and remove and replace. All right, so moving right along at like a snail's pace. The next, we start talking about the membranes, right? Oh, and here's a nice picture of that fluted metal deck. So you can see how, the water can gather in there. And then you can see on that insulation under the TPO, how it's mechanically fastened. And then also the way the membrane is mechanically fastened in this case, but you are also going to do some heat welding there. But here's 3 of the more common single-ply systems, right? So, Matt, you guys run into a lot of EPDM where you are.
Yep. Yeah. Here in the Midwest, we don't. I don't think we need to be as concerned about having a white roof.
Yeah, and pros and cons. I mean, because there is white EPDM right now. I don't know why that hasn't helped them. It doesn't seem to have helped them as much.
This might be a personal opinion. White EPDM is not typically a very good product.
Okay.
In comparison, anyway.
All right. That's interesting, and that explains a lot. What do you like about EPDM over, the other membranes?
I think that EPDM it's trusted and it's proven to a lot of guys. There's data behind it, right? The formula's been out there a long time. And I think that EPDM, in my opinion, relies very heavily on the quality of the installation. If you have a quality install, an EPDM roof can last a long time. But if you don't have a quality install, it'll fail really fast.
Right. And then what about, you can't weld EPDM, right?
No.
So now we're talking about cover tape for seams and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And wouldn't that make it a whole lot more expensive?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. So yeah, because rolls of cover tape, I'm blown away by the costs of those things. And then you get anything above 6 inches and they come in like 50-foot rolls, right? And they still seem as expensive as a 6-inch 100-foot or more. So
yeah, cover tapes and all the adhesives that go along with it. It's not my go-to system to install, but yeah, my opinion behind it is the reason I believe there's some hardcore fans out there is definitely the trusted system. I think people have concerns about the age of whatever formula is currently being used for TPO, and if they know how long it actually lasts.
Yeah. And I mean, wasn't that the hardest thing? Well, especially for me in the early 2000s, guys moving from modifieds to TPOs. I mean, we had just managed to talk them out of coal tar pitch, and now that and then was built up was okay. That's okay. I can have 7 plies or whatever, and then we get to modified. We've got a couple of plies, and now we're saying a single ply. But the TPO comes in a bunch of different thicknesses. And I think 45 mil or 045 is pretty much the thinnest, right? Do you ever have anything thinner than that?
I think for TPO, that's the thinnest that I've seen.
Yeah. And then, of course, if they put a fleece back on it, that gives you a little more thickness, but a lot of specs are calling for 060, and then you get into the fiber tights. And, well, I think fiber tight seems to measure their thicknesses differently, right? What you would call an 060 is like about an 080 in fiber tight.
I don't know about that. I know that like I would say probably their bread and butter is like 36 mil.
Yeah, 36 mil.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was their argument, was that's as good as a 45, right? That and you guys used quite a lot of fiber tight in the Milwaukee area. Oh,
yeah. Where I used to work before, we used a lot of fiber tight.
yeah. There's talk of, I don't know if fiber tight's been around 50 years, but it's got to be about close, right?
Yeah, it's got to be very close now.
Yeah. So, and I know there are some roofs that are still have the original fiber tight on them. And then, so TPO, of course, is less expensive. It welds, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because the fact that it welds, you don't have to buy these cover strips, but the fact that it welds means that you get cold welds, and what they do is they run a robot on the long lengths, and if you set that robot up wrong, that's a problem. And even if you've got dirty power, right, that can really affect the way that robot operates. But generally, those robots are getting about 40 foot an hour, I would say, when you're running those. And so, but now we've got this labor component, because when you welding TPO by hand, you're getting probably about 20 or less an hour. So you've got that labor side to think about, and there's always welding with TPO, right? Even if it's a mechanically attached system, we've still got welding. And then go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, some manufacturers have actually, while I was still in the field, had me using white EPDM peel and stick on their TPO roofs to get their warranty. That's what they wanted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a northern throwback, right? Old habits die hard. Yeah, and then the last one that we've got on this screen is the PVCs. And so it's like a TPO, but one of the nice things about PVC is it's grease resistant. We use it around airports quite a lot because of fuel contamination, but it is more expensive. And then I understand that in your part of the world, it can get quite brittle.
Yes, it can. It doesn't do well, I think, with the cold, and then the cold, hot.
Yeah. Okay, the temperature fluctuations. Yeah, cool. All right. There are obviously other types of membrane out there, and then there are lots of different manufacturers of membrane, and that we won't get into that, but what we will, let's talk about the next one, which I've referred to as layered systems. I don't know if anybody else refers to them as layered systems, but it sort of made sense. So we still get some calls for built-up roofs. Do you guys ever do built-up?
No, we don't install built-up. Service, obviously, we'll service a built-up roof, but no company, no roofing company I've ever worked for has installed it, so I haven't had the pleasure, I guess.
Okay, all right, yeah. So we used to have the kettles, and so we always were looking for something humorous to put on our equipment, So we used school buses for transporting guys. We had some math jokes on the school buses, and then we had a dog as a mascot. And so on the back of the kettle, I always wanted to put on there, I may be smelly, but I won't leak on you with our dog. But it was never approved. So we did, and I mean, I don't know. I have seen kettles around here, but I mean, that's hopefully a thing of the past. But now we've gone into the modifieds. And how much modified work do you guys do?
In the Midwest, we really don't do any. I don't think again, kind of the same reason it doesn't react well with the cold. So you don't see it. I mean, you see it, but certainly not anything that I see very often in any sort of spec or anything like that around here.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, down here, it's still, I wouldn't say prevalent, but it's still strong. And I still have clients that I would fight with to switch. You know, guys who own multiple buildings and have been in the family for years, and they don't want to go to single-ply. And I remember one guy in particular, I eventually persuaded him, just give me one small building, you know, and then he switched over. But we got sort of pros and cons, right? The layered idea is supposed to give you the security of, you know, less danger of things penetrating the roof system. But if you guys ever get a piece of 60 mil or 80 single-ply and put it on a board and then try to drive a nail through it, it doesn't penetrate that easily, does it? Now with the modified systems, we're using torches. You know, so we got a flame up there, which doesn't go well with a wooden deck, right? So that's kind of becomes an issue. So, and then there is the weight issue, although I don't, you know, I think it's fairly rare that it's eliminated because of weight. And if you haven't used it much, but I can't remember much of that. But uplift is good, right? You get good uplift, and the way you lay out the modified, it comes in rolls. You know, these rolls are about 3 foot wide, and you literally have a flame torch that you're heating the tar on this membrane, and then you either kicking it out in front of you, or we have like a hook and you're pulling it towards you as you heat. And so you're trying to get an even temperature across that roll to melt the asphalt, and it's not easy. I mean, guys get really good at it, but you're looking at the bleed out on either side to see if you've done a good job on the sides, but then you got the middle to worry about, and you know, you don't really get you know, how do you tell? But you do have multiple layers, so that there's a bit of protection there. And then I've always felt like it's pretty easy to fix, right? You know, you do an X cut and you just torch a patch on over the top. And you guys do a lot of those kind of repairs, right?
Yeah, I mean, even here, I'm not entirely sure about where I'm working now, but in the past, we've pretty much relied on cold applied methods.
Okay, cool. And that we do see some cold applied down here as well. And again, it's a trade-off price-wise. And always those adhesives are expensive.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you're not installing these types of roofs, you're probably not insured for open flame, and you know, you don't really have guys that are maybe skilled in doing the torch down. So
yeah, and I mean, I think so many, you know, and you think about it, we're spending an hour talking about, you know, just each little section here, and this course that I just put together, that Nicole's advertising behind her head there, the TED part, you know, we spend a lot of time just talking about one topic. It's so in depth. So, and as an estimator, you see this all the time, because how do you replace an estimator? That takes a lot of training. And actually, Matt and I are right in the middle of putting together an estimated training course for this exact reason, just so that you get the depth of knowledge to go with now the ability also to, sometimes read plans or understand what's on that roof and how you're going to handle the change of direction of the membrane on the roof. All right, so next up, we're talking about flashings, and don't get excited. It's just this kind of flashing that you're seeing on the screen. But, it's been said flashings are responsible for 80 or 90% of the leaks. When you were running the service department, Matt, is that pretty much what you experienced?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And is that a result of poor installation, or is it, what do you put it down to?
Actually, I'm going to correct myself. I would say 90% of the leaks were from flashings or HVAC contractors.
Yeah, people causing leaks, right? So tongue in cheek, we've always said that, the things that cause problems on the roof are acts of God, and then the next one is acts of idiots, right? Acts of idiots are pretty prevalent.
Oh, and Caleb said HVAC guys.
Yeah. And I mean, we could talk HVAC stories. There are fans in those equipment. And I've found fans on the deck that have been left outside there, and then the wind actually catches those, and the blades tumble along and cut slit marks as they go. Screws that you stand on, it's great. But what about the flashings themselves? Do you think it's an installation problem, or is it a movement problem, or what do you think is that the sort of root cause there?
I think that it can be a combination of, if anything's installed improperly, you're going to have issues. With EPDM, if you want like a 30-year warranty, you're supposed to basically double flash all your flashings. Every corner gets 2 corner flashings. They want you to basically double up in the 90. So, if they do that for a reason, because they know the membrane shrinks and pulls, and I'd see it a lot on ballasted roofs, where the membrane isn't really held into place with anything other than the weight. So eventually it gets strong enough with the shrinking. Like if I get up on a roof and the customer's, I got a leak and I know it's by a unit and it's a ballast roof, like the first thing I'm looking at is the corners. Yeah. And I would say 9 times out of 10, there's a hole right in the center because it's pulled apart. So in those scenarios, it could be, well, did they not apply both flashings, or is it just the poor, the design, right? Like,
right. Another thing is, a lot of this equipment should be secured to the deck. And when it's not secured to the deck, you definitely get movement. And I've had suggestions where the drain leaks because it wasn't secured to the deck properly, and now you get movement, and then there goes the watertightness of it. So we define flashing as anywhere where, and when we say the roof changes direction, it's really the membrane is changing direction, right? It's going up or it's going around, or and now there are a lot of liquid applied flashings, which are they got to be really good because they're really expensive. But that's that makes some of this a little easier. Of course, we already mentioned HVAC, but we could also blame plumbers, right? We also got plumbers causing problems up there. What else would you like to say about flashing while we on that topic, man?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably, from a labor standpoint, probably the most crucial part of the install, right? Like it's easy to teach new guys how to help you install field, but it takes some experienced guys to properly do all your details and your flashings. So
Yeah.
it's the hardest labor to come by.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I'm sure I've still got blisters from trying to weld pipe boots. And the other thing thanks for bringing that up, because the labor component affects the field and the flashing, right? Because you've got to go around these flashings, around these pipes, around these curves with your field membrane. So it slows down your field. And then you've also got the time that you got to spend on getting the flashing watertight. So it is a major influence on labor and cost. All right, we believe it or not, we're coming close to the end for this session. We got maybe one or two more slides, and I know it's already 5 o'clock, so I know you guys want to go home. But so let's just quickly talk about drainage. Generally we've got these three types of drainage, right? Either an open edge, or we've got drains, or we've got scuppers. Drainage, of course, is a huge deal because, well, first of all, by code, that water has to get off the roof, right? So we are required an 1/8 of an inch minimum slope, right? And a lot of them now 1/4 inch, and I'm even seeing, 1/2 inch minimums. Any of that changed up in your area, or is it still the same numbers?
I feel like our codes might be different there. But I don't want to say for sure.
But we got to have some kind of positive slope, right? Minimum.
Yeah, you definitely want some positive slope.
Can't be dead flat. And the trouble is, we're not, we're roofers, right? We're not like engineers, and we're not carpenters. We're not getting this perfectly flat surface where a 1/4 of an inch slope is going to make a difference. You got seams and bumps, and to me, it should be a little more than that. But anyhow, that's what's out there. So you've got that slope, and then that slope you don't want running against the seams of whatever membrane you're putting on there, right? Because now you got another issue of constant movement against the seams. And then when you start getting into the internal drains, now we've got that problem we're just discussing earlier of getting those flashed properly and sumped properly, and that's what I'm sure you got a couple of stories on the drain side.
Yeah, I noticed you left out of your list to everybody's favorite internal gutters.
Yeah. Let's not. You start twitching when you when you talk about it. Yeah. And then we had a change in the drainage calculations. Probably, I don't know. It must be more than 5 years ago now. But suddenly we needed more emergency overflows. Did you guys experience the same thing?
Yeah. Well, I think it just introducing the overflow thing as a requirement in general.
Yeah.
Is everywhere now. You don't see a new build going up without that, and if you do, you should probably say something.
Yeah. And now this is, by the way, this is going through the parapet wall or through the walls of on the side, the sides of the building so when you do a re-roof, now you've got to meet the new drainage calcs, and so that might mean additional scuppers and emergency overflows put in. And then we have touched on uplift and pressure and that sort of thing already, but let's just say that it's really important, right? Because as soon as you get to the side of a building, you've got the wind coming from different directions, and just like a plane's wing, that wind slows down and causes a suction underneath it, and that's going to pull your membrane right off the roof. So let's just recap a couple of things. I mean, I think understanding your roof systems is key, and if you don't understand them, go through this training, at least that we've done. The NRCA has got some. Get to understand drainage and your best practices for installs, because callbacks eat up your profits, right? That's basically going to be, as it is, it can be fairly tight. And then if you start getting callbacks, and especially if you're doing repair or maintenance jobs, those are even smaller. So a callback basically eliminates your profit. Any of you guys, or Matt, you got any final thoughts or words?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered a lot.
But we haven't covered enough for you to become an estimator on this call, right?
No, I'll say this, there's a enormous number of things that need to be taken into account beyond the actual roof itself when estimating a project.
Yeah. That
was a question I was going to raise to Matt. So like, with this type of education and others, at the end of the day, I feel like there's like 5 things that you need to consider, and I'm just going to kind of rattle this off and you'll correct me. But you mentioned the building, right? We have to understand the building. We have to understand what's going on inside the building, or the plan for that building, whether it's meat packaging or whatever it may be. And then you have to understand your region. And then from there, you can start to put together some of those options, right? The region is going to be your weather and your wind uplift, and whether it's you in Michigan where you have, like the fresh water compared to salt water, I imagine is going to be a big difference as well with some of the materials that we're using, right? So for a newer estimator, covering some of those things I just mentioned, what would be like the 3 to 5 top things that you really want to start to ask yourself and go to the engineers and the manufacturers that's going to help you on your way?
Yeah, so as far as well, first off, I think the biggest thing that maybe you didn't mention there is understand your customer, right? And what they need, what they want, that can make the difference on, the belt and suspenders scope of work that you can put together for them, because they want to keep the building for the rest of their life and pass it down to their kids, versus I'm selling this in 2 years, and then as far as what you can take back to a technical department, engineer and stuff like that, typically the stuff you named off is probably like the few big things. They'll want to know like the simple stuff, right? Like what are you trying to do? What type of roof do you want to use? But the big things that I see as an estimator that people tend to miss, and they get very, very focused on, okay, I need to understand every layer of the roof, which is definitely important. But then how are you getting the stuff to the roof? How are you getting the stuff off of the roof? Where are you staging? How are you protecting what's inside? What is inside? One thing that one of my foremen taught me once that really stuck with me was, when you're running a job, one of the most important things to think about is what and who is inside. And if you mess up, what does the displacement do to the job, right? And so planning accordingly, just to, I don't know, I guess protect yourself, but protect your customer. It's not always cut and dry, right?
Yeah, and contrary to what you might think, a concrete deck without a roof system on it is not going to keep wood out the building, and especially if it's a twin T type. And then we see this on all kinds of decks, that you get dust and what have you in going into the building, and then the fumes. So some of these adhesives, I mean, we've cleared a building with fumes before. So then you want these low VOC, or they're not very smelly. If I think that's what it stands for, not very smelly adhesives, but they are very much more expensive again.
Yep. And we've done the same too, you know, a clinic or something like that. Um, the job I was on, that when I had that conversation with my foreman, I was putting a roof on a cerebral palsy center. And he basically said, if you flood this building, where are all those kids going to go tomorrow? You know, and I
Right.
was like, yeah, you got a point, you know, like you taking into account, you know, probably extra material for tie-in, extra time, you know, just extra precautions.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to everybody else who's stuck around. Do we need to answer any questions, or are we
Nope.
good?
We do not have any outstanding questions. And just for the people who are left, just know that I'll share the recording on social media as well. So that'll be
Awesome.
available.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. I hope next time we're here, we'll be talking about our estimating course. But right now, we're talking about getting into commercial and a way for everybody in your roofing company to learn about commercial roofing so they can ask the right question or not be embarrassed by answering the wrong ones. Go ahead.
Someone's got a question here.
Oh,
Hey, I just lost my train of thought, what I was thinking about. Okay. So when you're doing an estimation on a commercial roof, I guess in your area or wherever you are, do you guys have like a per square cost for like how you judge your estimates? Like how do you figure that cost?
Yeah, well, and I'll let Matt answer this as well, but that is a very risky number, right? Because the number of penetrations for starts is going to make a huge difference. And then how much insulation and which material. So what we did do is we have some guidelines, but you definitely can't rely on it because you put the one roof next to the other and you're actually shocked at the difference in the price per square
Yeah.
foot. What's your take on that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the importance of using some sort of tool, you know, to do a proper takeoff and get a proper material list. Because there's too many variables in commercial roofing to rely on like a square foot price.
Right. And that aligns with my thoughts as well because my boss, he does a lot of single roofs and siding and stuff like that. So he's used to the per square like figure. Like I can price this based by the square and be good. But I keep stressing to him that there's way too many variables. There's a taper, there's, you know, penetrations, there's all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, one layer of coverboard alone could set you off, you know, by a pretty large dollar amount, right? Like,
yeah,
right, right, of course.
yeah,
I just
like
wanted to make sure
$90
my
a square.
thoughts,
Yeah,
I
no,
just wanted to make sure my thoughts aligned.
you're definitely right, Daniel. And so we really encourage people to get a good estimating process and program that gives you a lot of detail. Because you
So what
still
would that program be? Sorry.
well, we have Matt and I have designed the contractor toolbox that you can give us a shout about or just scan the code. We can show you how that works, and there are several out there. But there's the estimating edge is another one, which is sort of the Cadillac. It starts getting expensive. I think we've got all the features matched, but
Cool.
yeah, give us a shout and we'll show you what we got.
Okay, yeah, because right now I mean, I use a lot of AI to price things. Um,
Daniel,
so yeah,
if you check the chat, we just sent you a link. That's probably your best bet. Just book a one-on-one with Brian. You guys can sit down and see what probably fits your business best.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the square foot price is scary, and of course AI definitely has a place in roofing, right? But it's still
I don't know about pricing, but
yeah, with pricing, the risk is so enormous because you only have to make one big mistake, and if you've got a decent sized commercial job, it can actually put you out of business. Right? So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always check everything too. But the company that I work for, we've just been like siding. Then we have a service department that repairs stuff. That's originally where I was hired, was in the service department, just like as the lowest guy on the totem pole. So, that was a year ago, but I've shown my value in the company, and then they didn't actually have a roofing division within their company. So, or a leadership position. And I saw the opportunity to create my own position and lead it.
yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
so we're going to the flat roof. We're moving into flat roofs. So, it's a lot to figure out.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, contact us. We can definitely help you guys. All right. Well, thanks
Hey,
everyone
hey,
for joining. Go ahead.
Brian, Jamie has his hand up. Jamie
Oh,
Schmidt, yeah.
Jamie's here. How's it, Jamie?
Yeah.
I got your pictures. I
He's been
love
here the
them.
whole time.
Yeah, I've been here the whole time, Brian.
Engaging in the chat like crazy.
I would say this just about that per square price. That is for everyone getting into the commercial roofing, the per square price is the siren song that will wreck your business faster than you want to admit. It's
Yeah.
usually born out of, we got to get estimates fast. We got to be aggressive. We want to get roofs. And invariably, you are going to wreck the company by just trying to force something that can't be broken down into a per square price. In the initial, once you've done all your homework, then you can say, well, we're coming in at such and such a square. But if your goal is to try and get a one size fit all per square price, you either won't win any jobs, or you'll win jobs that will bankrupt you. So
Thanks.
just what Brian was saying.
And that's coming from a roofing professional who's running a commercial roofing company right now. So good advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I agree too. I do a lot of protecting my boss's income.
Yeah. And
It's
other
like
parts of his body.
yeah, that's a lot of my job, because customers would tell us that it's our fault that we did something wrong. And he's so nice and good. He's just like, yeah, well, we'll fix it for you. And then I go and I'm like, well, you set a bedroom up on top of a roof and didn't add a cricket or any kind of nothing. So all the roof empties into one spot. So, but he's like, yeah, I think it's our fault because we put the roof on. But I'm like, man, no.
Bring him to that call with Brian.
Yeah, I need to.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. And we'll have another one next month. So we'll let you know what we're going to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks,
guys,
Matt.
Everybody.
Thank
Cheers.
you, Matt.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers. Yeah. Cheers, Daniel.
Bye bye.